The First Lady of the United States, accompanied by UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay, Dr. Mae Jemison, and Senator Chris Coons.
Very impressed I am. Madam First Lady, dear Dr. Jill Biden, Senator Coons, Dr. Jemison, distinguished guests, it's a great honor for me, a great honor for UNESCO to be your guest here tonight at the White House, the People's House. This gathering was supposed to be only a joyful moment of celebration, marking the much expected, much welcomed return of the US to UNESCO. But the still unfolding events across the globe demand our attention as well. The situation in the Middle East, the horror of the terrorist attacks perpetrated against Israel on October 7th, brutally assassinating women, children, the elderly, are and must be on our minds. In the wake of these appalling developments, let me start by saying that my thoughts and prayer go to all the victims of this barbarity, as well as their families, including, sadly, a high number of Americans. I know how tirelessly US diplomacy and the President himself are working to prevent more civilian lives from being lost, whether Palestinians' populations or the hostages caught up in this spiral of death. And in the face of the current crisis, the protection of civilians in Israel and Gaza must be an imperative for all. And I do not forget that UNESCO was created on the ashes of the Holocaust, in the darkest of times, to advance peace through education, culture, and the sciences. But I'm here today in this country which has a strong conviction: united we stand, divided we fall. And the same is true for the global community. It was the message the United States sent to the world by deciding to rejoin our organization. We are stronger when united. It is precisely the message that Dr. Jill Biden so clearly conveyed last July in Paris, when the American flag was once again proudly raised at UNESCO headquarters. And I have to confess, we were not always sure this moment would happen. But in the end, we held to the belief, as expressed best by Winston Churchill, that Americans will always do the right thing after exhausting all the alternatives. And I want to thank you again. Your leadership is welcomed. Your cherished freedoms, as enumerated by your founders in the Constitution and lived every day here by your citizens, are a constant source of strength in a very fragmented world. These freedoms inspire the innovation of your scientists, the creativity of your artists, the courage of your journalists, the commitment of your educators and public servants, many of whom have worked with UNESCO over the years, and some of whom are here today. Throughout history, UNESCO has benefited from America's leadership, and in recent times, you have been sorely missed. But we also have recognized your nation's concerns that UNESCO had become too politicized to the detriment of its vital mission. But changes in our methods, as well as a strong investment in mediation, have enabled our member states to focus on our primary mission. We also have launched new strategic initiatives to firmly anchor our mandate in the 21st century. We focused on some of the most important freedoms that your country cherishes. Your third president, Thomas Jefferson, once said the most important institution for protecting democracy is a free press. We do agree. We embrace that preference at UNESCO, where we're focused on protecting journalists, especially those working in increasingly dangerous environments, like in Ukraine. For example, we recently supported dozens of Ukrainian photojournalists to document the impact of the war on cultural institutions, on culture in general. We're also helping journalists to cover complex scientific issues, like we did, for instance, during the pandemic, with the support of some of our university chairs that are here in the United States, like the University of Texas or the University of South Carolina. Take another issue that's a key US and UNESCO priority: ethical artificial intelligence. Our member states recently adopted the only universal standard-setting instrument on this issue, guaranteeing innovation in AI while respecting human rights and dignity. 50 countries are drafting national legislation based on this recommendation, and we look to your continued leadership as these standards are being implemented. In fact, we looked at your leadership to uphold all the global common goods we defend at UNESCO, and there are many, whether teaching younger generations about the unspeakable tragedy of the Holocaust or promoting girls' education, whether making Africa a priority for all our actions so the continent can reclaim its heritage and history and advance its educational priorities, whether sharing scientific information for the benefit of all, including to better understand the oceans, our planet's blue lung, UNESCO is actively pursuing its missions. And when it comes to cultural heritage, we're underlining its vital importance across the globe, not only in the heart of emergencies where we work to protect major cultural and religious sites damaged by war, but also in our designated World Heritage sites, which continue to attract tourism, including here in America. And as you know, the US is home to 25 World Heritage sites, including one that was added very recently to our list, only last month, the Hopewell Amerindian culture in southern Ohio. And finally, let me conclude by quoting President Biden's 2023 State of the Union address. He said that when world leaders asked him to define America, he could do so with just one word: possibilities. Here again, we do agree. America is a land of limitless possibilities. And with the US again playing a leading role at UNESCO, we see even more possibilities ahead for all of us. On behalf of UNESCO, thank you to President Biden. Thank you to the bipartisan congressional coalition who together made this day possible. And thanks to you, Dr. Biden, for your tireless support of the mandate of this organization. Welcome home. And it's now my pleasure and honor to introduce one of UNESCO's strongest congressional supporters, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Senator, thank you.
Thank you so much, Director General Azoulay. I am thrilled and honored to be joining you at this celebration, a celebration of our return to a global organization with 194 nation members that, as you so aptly pointed out, was built on our hope for the future on the ashes of the Second World War, on the destruction and loss and tragedy of the Shoah, a hope for a future in which we could connect with each other around the critical issues of the day: education, science, and culture. We've briefly lost our First Lady, who's returning now in a moment. She is the exemplar of education and is joined by our wonderful and talented president. Please give him a round of applause.
He has a seat I used to have. I miss the Senate. I really do. I miss seeing you, pal. Anyway, thank you all, and we're glad to be part of your outfit. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. Anyway. All right. See you. Sorry to interrupt.
That speech. L'chaim. I think you've all witnessed something that we in Delaware have known for decades: the closeness of the bond between our president and the First Lady and his family, his tireless commitment to working on behalf of our nation, the way his faith in us and in the future motivates him, and his willingness to yet again throw himself into the midst of difficult, even dangerous and demanding global moments. I am so grateful that he is our president at this moment. Please give him another round of applause. The United Nations was built in no small part by the United States on a vision of a world brought back together after that world had been shattered by conflict. And we are at this very moment, at a time when all of us have to reflect in the ways in which misunderstanding, differences, aggression, and conflict are impacting nations around the world. Director General Azoulay opened with some reflections on the tragedy that unfolded in Israel October 7th. I'm also always mindful of the ongoing brutality, the violence against the people of Ukraine by Russia. How is UNESCO relevant in these moments? It is an institution that helps to gather, to document, to protect, and to restore critical pieces of cultural heritage. UNESCO is doing remarkable work in Ukraine, even now, even as the war is unfolding, even as they are helping stand with the people of Ukraine in the face of an effort to try and erase Ukrainian culture. Just as decades ago, a horrible effort by the Nazis sought to erase Jewish culture from Europe, so too today. Holocaust education is a critical piece of UNESCO's mandate and ongoing work. If you think about the scope and reach of it, you could find no three better exemplars than the folks on this stage. For education, Dr. Biden, who has dedicated decades of her life to being a talented English teacher at a community college in our home community in Delaware and in Northern Virginia, who even now as First Lady continues to teach. Please give her a round of applause for her tireless dedication to education. It's that remarkable dedication to the spark, the creative spirit, the ways in which teachers transfer to their students the hope, the engagement, the optimism, and then students give back to their classroom, to their community, and the future that is at the very core of Dr. Biden's leadership and that critical pillar of UNESCO. For culture, we have the Director General, who was the Minister of Culture in France, one of the world's most cultured nations, if I do say so myself. But also someone who has helped lead UNESCO forward in a way that recognizes the central role that both preserving culture and advancing culture helps bring together the 194 nations that make up UNESCO. And our next speaker, Dr. Jemison, is someone who, as a pioneering engineer and astronaut and Peace Corps volunteer, is a reminder of what is possible through the realms of science. Given that, I'm left to wonder what I'm doing here. And as my staff reminded me, my role is simple. I'm a funder. I am an appropriator from the United States Congress. One of the things that was exceptionally difficult 5 years ago when we left was the causes that precipitated a previous administration to withdraw the United States from UNESCO. We have returned in no small part, Madam Director General, because of you, because of the ways in which you have led a reform effort at UNESCO that restored our confidence. And I'd like to thank and recognize former Ambassador Crystal Nix-Hines, a Wilmington native like myself, who served so well for us when we were in UNESCO and has tirelessly pressed me for us to return. Thank you for being here today, Ambassador. So let me just say this was a long and difficult effort that took bipartisan engagement in the House and the Senate. It took optimism and faith in the possibilities of the UN system. I just spent time last week in Paris with the Director General, but also in Geneva with our ambassador to the Human Rights Council, another critical multilateral UN-related entity from which we had withdrawn, which we have now rejoined. I am convinced that when we withdraw, that when we leave, the menu changes, the agenda shifts, and the absence of our voice produces worse results than our presence. We need to stay engaged in the world, at the United Nations, with nations that disagree with us, and with nations that are uncertain. I am convinced the United States is the greatest force for good in human history. I'm convinced our president leaves right now on a mission to reassert that central role that we can and should play. It has always been difficult. It has always led to controversy, but only by remaining engaged can we help shape a world that is more aligned with the values that are at the very center of UNESCO and that inspired that hopeful spirit with which we launched the UN and UNESCO decades ago. Let that be the spirit that brings us forward from this moment today. Let me now introduce our next speaker, Dr. Mae Jemison, as I mentioned, a doctor, an engineer, an astronaut, a Peace Corps volunteer who leads the 100-year Starship project. She was also the keynote speaker at the University of Delaware's commencement just this past spring. I'll give a brief quote from her commencement address. The action we take today can build a beautiful world tomorrow. In that spirit, please welcome Dr. Mae Jemison.
Thank you all very much. It is really my privilege to be here today. It is a privilege because right now you're doing something extremely special for me. You're sharing with me your time. And you see, time is a one irreplaceable commodity we have at our disposal, but it's fraught with possibilities, infinite possibilities. In those 86,400 seconds in each day, we can never get a single one of them back, but we get to choose what we do. Whatever our circumstances, we get to choose what we do. So thank you all for choosing to allow me to be here. Dr. Biden and Director General Azoulay and Senator Combs. So I want to thank each of you for sharing with your time, but I want to just do something really quickly. I just want to talk about UNESCO from the point of view of all of its commitments over the years to recognize and bring to the world's attention and to act to pioneer programs on critical, pivotal global issues, including fostering diversity and inclusion in STEM fields, which is particularly strong when you look at the L'Oreal UNESCO program for women, which has been around and had over 4,100 talented female researchers, one of them which won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. I think it's really important when we look at this is around the world, it's an international program, not just one country, and partnering makes a difference. And we know that whenever we have women involved in leadership and decisions, that the world gets better. We look at we talked about, you've already heard a lot of the things UNESCO is doing, and I don't want to go over that except for to say that UNESCO was instrumental in global scientific centers like establishing CERN, looking at tsunami early warnings, wrote the general history of Africa and all the 5 continents. It carried literacy campaigns to Italy, to the Republic of Korea, Afghanistan. It has established so much work in the sciences and also in cultures. When we look at UNESCO, right now is going to be spearheading the International Decade of the Sciences for Sustainable Development programs. But I want to just mention the World Heritage Program, because what I want to do just briefly is to tie together why I think that space, sciences, art, and culture and communications is so important. The World Heritage Program looks at and helps to define valuable sites, things that we as humans should not lose. But you know, space exploration has been involved in that too. I have to do a little shout out, right? That, you know, that we found beneath the Amazon rainforest some 61,000 structures in the jungles in the Mayan city of Tikal. When we look at from Egypt to China to South America to India, archaeologists are using space technology to experience really a golden age when it comes to ancient civilizations. So we use space to look back down and understand ourselves. You know, so why is this important? I think it's important because today is also the 20th anniversary of the Convention for Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage. And I was really struck by that because for me, all of what we do is both tangible and intangible, and those intangible things have been one of the problems that we've had. I'm just going to channel Zora Neale Hurston, who was an American anthropologist, African-American woman in the 1940s, who put things in such a way that she drew on the Southern culture. She said one of the most serious objections that people had to her was that having nothing, she did not know how to be humble. As a child, they thought her place was to realize that she was lucky enough to have a roof over her head and anything to eat. But that's one person's perspective of an intangible culture, right? But she also said, sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it does not make me angry. It merely astonishes me. How can anyone deny themselves the pleasure of my company? That's what happens. That's what happens when we don't understand and take into account cultures and things that happen. So when I look at the whole idea of intangible culture and this convention, it strikes me that one of the things it speaks of is that the importance of these intangible cultures, the importance of the diversity of cultures around the world is because it supports human creativity. Human creativity. And for me, that's where I see this really great parallel with the sciences. The underlying work that UNESCO does is foundational. It's the heavy lifting, because everything that we want to pass on to our children in the world is underpinned by what humans do and act upon. So when I went up into space, I took a number of things with me. Among them were a Bundu statue, B-U-N-D-U statue, was for the Women's Society in West Africa. I took up a poster of Judith Jamison from Alvin Ailey performing the dance Cry. And I also took up a certificate for Chicago public school students to promise to do well in math and science. And some people asked me, why did I take up these things? Because they seem sort of disparate. What do they have to do with space and astronauts? To me, they're about human creativity. You see, the same creativity that's required to launch a space shuttle, design a rocket, springs from the very same source of what we need to do in order to create a Bundu statue, right? What we need to do to design and stage the dance Cry. These are part of who we become, our legacy. Now, people sometimes think of science and the arts as separate and not connected, right? They think that they don't influence one another. But here's the thing. They're not really different sides of a coin. Sometimes people say they're different sides of the same coin, but I don't think they're that. I think they're more like harmonic resonances on a superstring, if we want to get really 21st century about them. There are different avatars, there are different parts of who we think we are as humans. They spring from our attempt as humans to build an understanding of our place in the universe that's internal to us and the universe that's external. The sciences are our manifestations, our attempt to express and share our understanding, our experience, and influence a universe that's external. The universe that's not, just peculiar to us as individuals. It's a universe that can be experienced by everyone. And I believe that the arts are an attempt to share and influence the universe through experiences that are personal to the individual. So I can say it again, the sciences provide an understanding of a universal experience. The arts provide a universal understanding of a personal experience. Why is this so important? Because today around the world, what we see a world that has been floored by miscommunication, information that hasn't gone well, grievances that are from the past that reach into the future, that our present is one of those things that sometimes we're not communicating at all. When it seems like we have incredible tools for communication, incredible tools for sharing information. We have incredible technologies, and yet we see people around the world not doing well. And this is where culture comes from. You see, because technologies and tools are not designed in a vacuum. They're not just sitting somewhere there for us to find them. It's how we decide to take advantage of our resources. That's the crux of the matter. Who's making the decisions? Who's doing the observations? And that happens not only in the physical sciences, it happens throughout the world, throughout everything we do. So culture underpins all of what we do. I want to end with one of the things that I think perhaps is the most important thing about space, what it could do best for us. But first I'm going to ask you a question. When was the last time you looked up? When was the last time you looked up at the sky? Like moments ago, for real, for real? You really looked up at the sky. Well, the reason why I ask that is because I believe it's one of the things that connects us. Around the world, every group of people have looked up at the sky. The word look up in so many languages is not just the physical act of looking up, it's something greater than that. And when I was a little kid, I remember looking up at the sky and wondering about the children around the world. Were they seeing the same thing I was seeing? And as I grew, I know that we see different constellations, we see different stars, but we see the same moon, the same earth. It's one of the things that connects us around the world. And so when I think through this, I think the most important thing that we can get from space exploration, that we can get from the sciences, that we can get from understanding cultures and sharing ideas, that we can get from communications, is to understand that we are earthlings, that we are bound by this planet. And as we move forward, that is the only way that we're going to get a world that we want to live in and pass on to our children. Thank you so much. And it's my distinct privilege and honor to introduce First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, who you know how many things she's done, her commitment to education, her commitment to building a better world that we can pass on and we can all be healthy, robust earthlings. Thank you.
Thank you, May, and your bravery has inspired a generation of young people to reach for the stars. And I have to say, as I was sitting there, I thought to myself, I can't wait to get back to my classroom on Thursday to tell them all about you. And then their next journal topic could be, if you were on a spaceship going into space, what 3 things would you take? Isn't that a great topic? And Director General Azoulay, thank you for your dedication to preserving and sharing the world's treasures. And I know you said that, you didn't know whether this was going to happen. Actually, I did, because every time I would see you, you were nudging, nudging, nudging. You know, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. And so when Joe was elected, I knew that that was one of the things that, you know, I knew he wanted to be a part of, and I wanted to be a part of. So thank you for what you've done. Thank you, Director General. And Senator Coons, tonight is only possible because of your leadership. And, you know, Chris has been such an incredible partner to Joe throughout Joe's career, throughout yours career. I mean, honestly, in Delaware, our state is so small. I think, you know, we're practically family. You know, I would see Chris and Annie at the CVS or up at the drugstore. I mean, really, that's how small Delaware is. So, but earlier this year, I traveled to Paris, and I watched, I mean, it was just so great. We had the greatest day as the United States flag was raised over the garden at UNESCO headquarters. And it was a stormy day, and we were holding our breath, right, that it wasn't going to rain. And as I looked out at our flag flying alongside the world's, all the flags were standing tall, and I thought of all the hard work and dedication that has led us to that moment, to work that was done by, hey, like all of you, everybody here in this room. So tonight we celebrate you and what you have done for our nation and for the world. And I also want to recognize all the members of Congress and their staffs who worked to pave the way for our return to UNESCO. So I am going to ask the members of Congress and their staffs, because I know how hard the staffs work. So could you please stand so we can thank you? You know that the children you represent benefit when they can learn from our past and lead us to a better future. Because our young people are the protectors of our democracy, the dreamers of a better world. And while I might be biased as a teacher, I think that we can all agree that education is one of the greatest shared tools in shaping our future. It changes us so that we can go on to change the world together. And I saw the power in Costa Rica, the power of education, when I met two teenage girls studying science. And years later, when I returned, I found them. And I found them pursuing their dreams, one as a food scientist and the other as a microbiologist. And I saw the power of education just last month in Missouri as I watched high school students learn about democracy and how to protect it. And I've seen the power of education in my own classroom, where my students juggle school and jobs and family, all with the goal of learning and growing so that they can build good lives and give back where they can. Everyone deserves that opportunity. And it was in the spirit of UNESCO that was created, to spread ideas and to open minds, to preserve our treasures so that we can remember the history that makes us who we are, to show us that our differences are precious and our similarities infinite. Those principles have helped weave our heritage through generations and to the present. The beauty of art that transcends language to speak to our hearts. The scientific discoveries that reveal the vast reaches of the universe or the microscopic systems of our own cells. The hum of shared humanity as we step into an ancient temple and learn about how our ancestors worshiped. The challenges of our time, from authoritarianism to food crisis to climate change, create an uncertain future. But what is certain is the possibility still inside of us to innovate, to cooperate, to discover new solutions. With Joe's leadership and all of your partnership, we will realize that future. One of the newest UNESCO World Heritage Sites is actually right here in the United States, as you referenced. Spread along the bends of the Ohio River are man-made hilltops and enormous, precise geometric shapes made of earth. Has anybody here seen it? No, 2, 3, 4. 4 people. We got to get going. We got to get working on this. So anyway, these are the work of the indigenous Hopewell culture. Their innovations, their hopes, their dreams are part of the American story and of our global heritage. And now that it is forever protected, we continue to learn from what they worked so hard to leave behind for us. So let us keep fighting to help young people grow and learn and use their voices. Let's inspire them with education and science and culture. And when we do, we'll empower the next generation of thinkers and dreamers and doers, helping them unleash their possibility, pushing our human story forward to a better future together. Thank you.